Welcome back to the budget transmission with a new panel. I'm Farrukh Pitafi. We are going to once again talk about more or less the same things. We are going to actually look at the outlay, the projections, the targets, and how much realistic those targets are. Just to remind viewers who are just joining in, the outlay of the federal budget is 8.5 trillion rupees. And PSDP's total size is 2.135 trillion, and that is 37% hike from the last time. Out of this, some 900 billion rupees go to the federal exchequer. And we are going to talk about all these matters. I'm going to introduce the guest as well, but there is a report prepared for you. First, let us watch it, and then we are going to discuss.
A pro-people, business-friendly and growth-oriented federal budget for fiscal year 2021-22 has been announced. Presenting the budgetary proposals for the next fiscal year in the National Assembly, Finance Minister Shaukat Tareen said the budget focuses on Prime Minister Imran Khan's vision of a strong and sustainable growth. The Finance Minister said the gross revenues for the next fiscal year have been estimated at 7,909 billion rupees compared to revised estimate of 6,395 billion rupees for the outgoing fiscal year. This shows a handsome growth of 24% in gross revenues. The minister said the FBR revenues are projected to grow by 24% from 4,691 billion rupees to 5,829 billion rupees. He said that the overall deficit for the fiscal year 2021-22 is estimated at 6.3% as opposed to the revised estimate of 7.1% for current fiscal year. The Finance Minister said primary deficit is targeted at 0.7%. Shaukat Tareen said the federal development spendings are being increased from 630 billion rupees to 900 billion rupees, which is an increase of around 40%. He said subsidies are projected at 682 billion rupees, up from 430 billion rupees. The Finance Minister said every household will be provided 500,000 rupees interest-free business loans, while every farming household will be given 2.05 million rupees interest-free farming loan and 200,000 rupees for the tractors and machineries. The families will be provided with low-interest housing loans up to 2 million rupees so that they can build their houses. The Finance Minister said 260 billion rupees have been allocated for SAS program in the next budget, which is by far the largest allocation. He announced the grant of 10% ad hoc relief allowance for all the federal government employees and 10% increase in pensions with effect from next month. The Finance Minister said the minimum wage is proposed to be increased to 20,000 rupees to mitigate the pressures on the low-income groups. The Finance Minister said the government has fixed 4.8% growth target for the next financial year. The Minister said an agricultural transformational plan has been devised to increase productivity and 12 billion rupees have been allocated for various agriculture-related initiatives. Shaukat Tareen proposed 33 billion rupees for housing projects of low-income people. Finance Minister said a total of 91 billion rupees are proposed in the budget to ensure water security. Shabbir Ahmed Wagra, PTV World.
So let me now introduce the panel. I've got in the studio, I'm joined by Ahmed Zafar Dutani Sahab, who is President of Re-Energia, and he hails from the development sector. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Ahmed Jawad Sahab, Central Information Secretary, ruling party Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, also joins us. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Dr. Bakar Ahmed, Joint Executive Director of Sustainable Development Policy Institute, and also a renowned economist, joins us. Dr. Sir, thank you very much, sir, for your precious time. Idris Gigi Saab, who is a member managing committee, Karachi Chamber of Commerce and Industry, also joins us on Skype. Thank you very much, Gigi Saab. With your permission, let me start with Dr. Bakar Ahmed. Dr. Saab, your initial thought about the budget.
Thank you, Farrukh Sahab. I think as highlighted in your package which you have just shown, the budget was prepared under some very constrained circumstances, and of course we are experiencing a prolonged incidence of COVID-19 as well. So given these uncertain circumstances, I think the government has tried to present a budget in which three things have been kept in mind. First is that the inflationary impact, or the currently high levels of inflation being experienced in the country, there should be some mitigation over there, and that can be done, of course, through not heavily taxing the various sectors, particularly those which directly impact the poor. Second, the government is starting to see some signs of growth, and given this growth, we believe that the government has taken some measures in the budget to expand job creation prospects as well. And third, I think we are getting a feeling that the government also wants to consolidate the gains made on the external front, which is the uptick seen in Pakistani exports, for example, because you are also seeing some trade-related benefits as well, which have been given in this budget.
Right. Right. Let me also bring in Gigi Sahab. Sir, your opening thoughts about the budget.
Bismillah Rahman Rahim. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me here and giving me a chance to give a point of view of entire industries. I would say that that budget is friendly as far as we have learned today, because a lot of things will come on coming days. Likewise, they have reduced the duty of raw materials of 168 items. So which we need to see that what are those items, because same times we need to see the import bill also, as we have seen that this year we are forecasting that 55 billion US dollar worth imports will be already in this system, and our export, if everything goes well within this month, then it will touch around 25 billion US dollar. Means we are around 30 billion trade means difference. So at the same time, we need to focus. We need to like what we say that think about the local industries as well, because this is the area. The local industries is the main thing which can like save your imports, which can save your foreign exchange. So this is the main area government should focus on that as well.
Right. Very quickly, your concern is only the local industry or also current account deficit? Because we have seen that imports have once again spiked, so there is a possibility that right now we have a current account surplus, that it can go back to deficit.
Right, because you know that this year the cotton crop is not as good as last year and the previous years. So we will need to import the cotton this year, which will also increase the import values.
Right.
So if you gather all these things, all these measures, I am forecasting that this year, the next fiscal year, our trade deficit will be increased. It will not be as same as this year.
Right. And we are going to talk about that later in the program as well. Ahmed Zafar Dotani Sahab, your take on the budget.
Well, thank you very much, Farrukh. I mean, I have to echo what Waqar said, to be very honest. Yes, it's been a kind of a trapeze act or a tightrope act, as you rightly pointed out. You know, I was just looking at the numbers again, and you know, one thing is clear: the government, whether through current, mostly through the current expenditure, is trying to make sure that it gives relief. Okay, and it's, you know, it's basically targeted a lot of it under the COVID emergency. About 100 billion is again lying there. It's giving direct relief to the government employees. I think that's a bit of appeasement.
Right.
But
Appeasement.
I think that, yeah, I mean it is.
10% increase in salary.
Yeah, I know I'm sitting at the wrong place.
No,
please don't throw me out.
No, don't consider as part of this.
Let me get to two other very important things. I think one of the things which becomes very glaring when we look at this budget, and I mean, I was trying to do a comparison of the last 4 years of the same time.
Right.
to be very honest, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Okay.
One story which is not changing in this budget, and I think which we need to be very cognizant about, is at the end of the day, our total federal development budget is not even 1/8, or let's say 1/7, if you want to stretch it, of the total current budget. So that means we have very little space for development spending. So it really means that the government is trying to squeeze more out of its current expenditures and see how that can impact. And I think the third and I think more important thing is on the revenue side. As we heard from the chambers, that the tariff, sort of decreasing the tariffs. I mean, it's alarming for some people, but I think overall that's a very good sign when border taxes are brought down, because that is really showing that the government has finally got some, how should we say, some zen inside it, and it is actually trusting the intermediate imports to really boost the overall export strategy, right? And I think, last but not least, again, I think that the one thing I want to really clarify, if you just look at the numbers, the provinces and the defense pretty much at par. So, I mean, we'll expand on that later, but I think I want to bring that.
But with due respect, the defense budget has gone down.
I mean, in real terms, yes.
Yeah, it has, and it has been stated as well. But let me bring in Ahmed Jawad Sahab. I wanted the government's input the last, because I wanted to understand how you are going to respond to the comments. And instead of being too critical, most are actually agreeing with the government's job. So, your opening comments, sir, about budget?
Farrukh, I think, first of all, we don't see anything negative in this budget. The budget is addressing some very vital issues, starting from tax reforms. So you might have read the tax reforms which have been introduced in this budget, which is to facilitate the taxpayer, which is to expand the tax net. So there are a lot of good things about the tax reform. So that is directly linked to the revenue generation.
About that, 5.829 billion is the target, 17.4% increase, from the last time. And no new taxes. So it is going to be indirect taxes.
Farrukh, this year we had an increase of 18% revenue generation from the last year.
Last year you levied more taxes. This time you are not.
Yeah, but 18% increase in 1 year is a lot. So if we are setting a target of 17% increase, so I think it is in line with what we have seen in last 1 year. And we must not forget that the last 1 year was one of the most challenging time for the business and the industries. So tax collection and revenue generation must have been adversely affected because of the corona. Yet, if we have a good revenue generation this year, we can easily set a target of this much of increase. So I think it's quite realistic. The second thing which I see, which I think there was a lot of expectation to that aspect, that how it is going to provide relief to the common man, and how it is going to ensure that there is no further burden on the common man. So I think there are a number of steps which indicates that common man has been taken care. For example, 10% increase in the salaries and the pensions. For example, minimum wages 20,000, and I tell you, if you go back and see my tweet 1 month ago, you will see this 20,000 in my tweet. This I declared at that time that it should be.
Congratulations on that, but I understand, and one should be actually lauding this bit, because minimum wage is a huge issue throughout the world. But why are you taxing our data? 5 rupees per 5 GBs?
I think it is because the data usage is now a very important, I think, part of our life, and the government has to create ways to generate funds. So I think that must be the reason. And previously there was nothing on this on the data.
But you are only on the voice. You are taxing a tap that actually can generate more revenue if you let it flow without any regulation?
You see, previously, in fact, the mobile companies, they also changed their model of revenue when the mobile user shifted from a call to a WhatsApp call.
Okay.
So the WhatsApp call is data,
Okay.
and a call made on the mobile network, that is not data.
Okay. So you don't like WhatsApp.
So I mean, it is changing. You know, it's a change of
No, I
technology.
understand. Absolutely, sir. Allow me to go back to Dr. Bakar Ahmed. Dr. Saab, because you and I have been discussing this in the past as well, the revenue target and the negotiation that is going on with the IMF. Do you think that at this moment we are in a position to say that these numbers that have been presented and the methodology of collecting that has been presented is final, or we still have to wait from IMF for a nod?
Yes, I think the budget strategy, overall strategy, is still under discussion. And of course, what I'm told is that before presentation of the budget today, there have been prior consultations with the IMF in recent past. And broadly, the IMF was in picture. They were aware about the shift which the government wants to make, moving from stabilization to growth measures. The government also wanted some homegrown ideas to be factored in the budget, which including some expansionary fiscal policy measures which we are seeing over here. But I think where IMF, and we'll have to wait for the review, where IMF may be a little concerned is two or three things. First, I think, and I think Ahmed Durrani Sahab was also alluding to this. First is that in the taxation structure, I think we need to be careful that some tax exemptions or preferences have been given, which may not have been possible if you were under a strict IMF program. So either there's a leniency being shown by the IMF, or this has yet to be discussed. You're seeing some sectors like stock market, you're seeing auto sector, which ended up receiving, in fact, reductions in their tax burden. Second, I think we didn't hear anything about petroleum development levy yet. And that's where I think we would like to hear more tomorrow in the finance minister's press conference.
Right. Can you, off the top of your head, can you speculate about a possible number on levy, petroleum development levy?
Well, I think, Farrukh Sahab, in total you have to raise an additional 500 billion rupees at this moment if you have to reach the tax target which you have stated in the budget today. So, unless there's an increased fiscal effort by FBR, which I doubt there could be, because they can't end up taxing the existing taxpayers more, and during these COVID times, there are limitations to how much you can widen the tax net. Anything else would have to be squeezed through non-tax revenues, including the PDF.
Right. Let me go back to Gigi Saab. Sir, you are listening to the comments of other participants as well. I'm at this moment interested in the revenue target. Do you think it is realistic, and the private sector or the industrial sector is going to actually cooperate in collecting these taxes?
Yeah, they are quite competent, and obviously the trade has been increased, the export has been increased, and as we have said earlier, that the budget this time presented by the federal government is obviously is friendly for the industries. So obviously the target which the government is targeting is quite achievable, and I believe that with some fine-tuning, it can be easily achieved, as we already are discussing that agriculture. In your report, you have told that agriculture sector is very important. It can bring itself around $10 billion US, because during this year, Pakistan has already imported worth 2 billion worth wheat, and coming year will be the same number with the addition of cotton. Around the 1.5 or 2 billion. So 4 billion in total, which we are already importing in agriculture sector, and this sector can bring the export, I believe $10 billion US, which Pakistan can easily save through agriculture sector.
Right. And you think that total allocation of 12 billion rupees to take care of the agriculture sector, I understand it is provincial subject, but the federal government also actually focuses on it. Do you think it is going to take care of our local development?
Yeah, if with extreme measures, it can be. But as you know that everything is not in the federal government. They need to cooperate with the provincial government as well, and with combination of provincial and federation government, it can be done easily.
Right. Durrani Sahab, bringing down the fiscal deficit from 7% to 6.3. Realistic target?
I think it's a very realistic target. I mean, to be very honest, I mean, if you realistically think about it, these 0.1% changes, they are quite, sort of, I find them insignificant. I find a number like 1%, 6%, 7%, 8%. And as you can see, a lot of the rest is, I think, not something to be too worried about, right? Because these come out of, basically Excel spreadsheets, and I'm sorry, Vakar, but, end of the day, to me, 6 to 7, if they said, yeah, we're going to go to 8 or we're going to go to 5, then I'd be worried. But I think 6 is achievable. The other thing I just want to comment very quickly with your permission. That look, I mean, we talk about achieving the revenue target. So, one of the few things we're going to look forward to in the coming year, especially, is for example, the single window. So the national single window is now going to supplement the VBOC, which is the web-based custom system. It's going to then supplement all the other 32 to, I think, 71 various functions that have to be performed at border crossings. Those are all, the government has created this National Single Window Authority. So if it starts functioning, I think the border leakages in revenue. So even if the tariffs go down, which they should, especially for the intermediates, I think you're going to net more revenue. So basically the leakages on the border revenue are going to reduce, right? Which means that, at the border, if you remember, so basically real tariffs are about less than 30%, but total collection is about 40+% at the border, which includes presumptive taxes and business taxes, etc., etc. So, I mean, if you look at it in a very roundabout way, I think with this digitization, with this leakages going down at the border, even if tariffs go down, we have a good likelihood of, at least on the border side. Now that leaves you with the revenue on the tax side. On the tax side, I think for the federal government, I think this thing about indicating, actually, if you remember, so 15 years ago, there was a lot of movement, especially by the chambers as well as by other authorities, that single tax rates, single slabs, lower tax rates, bringing more people into the net. So I think in absence of doing that, which could be a really great reform, they've actually tried to just keep the tax rate at the same level, thereby going to rely on more tax net increases.
Tax net or indirect also?
No, I don't think indirect. You see, Bakar already mentioned, indirect, we have enough cushion. I mean, I can talk about that unless you're in a hurry, but we can talk about aggregated fuel demand and what that would do. But I think realistically, I don't think this government is going to go towards more indirect taxation, because in the last 3 years, they've learned that, there's a pushback against this, right? And it hurts them. It hurts them.
The inflation.
Yeah, not only that, but it also, I mean, look at IT industry. The IT industry basically was told to go take a hike, which they thought, saying that, there's going to be no tax exemption. But actually, they do have a tax exemption, except that now it is basically criteria based, right? So in other words, they will get if they declare everything, instead of presumptively saying, okay, you don't have taxes, so behind which you could do funny things. So basically, they've been told, if you declare properly, right, you will get your tax written off. If you don't, well, you won't. I think that's a very good measure. And it's a sign of a confident government, to be very honest.
It is, but there's a distinct sense of deja vu. When we hear about a self-assessment scheme, when we hear about, automation, sir, when we hear about various other measures, because for the last 20 years, we have been hearing about that. But Ahmed Jawad Saab, what magic wand do you have that this time these things are going to work. I'm going to talk about the GST model as well, goods and products tax. But at this moment, let us start with this.
Farrukh, first of all, we may recall that when PTA government started after 2018, the first budget, or by I think second budget, we had increased the tax base from I think it was 1900,000 to 2600, 2700,000. So it was kind of a 30% increase in the tax net. So I mean, the magic button which you are asking for this year, I mean, this magic button has already played in the previous year.
Automation actually is an issue that went to the courts as well, and courts actually intervened. So that becomes a problem.
We have to move with the technology. I mean, we have to introduce. There may be unexpected, results out of that, but we have to, go with the technology. We have to use all over the world, the revenue system, the inland revenue authorities. They are all using automation. It gives efficiency. It gives transparency. Yes, once you are implementing, there could be question marks. There could be challenges. Especially in a culture, in a Pakistani culture, in a Pakistani society where the culture of paying taxes is very low. And we are converting that into automation also. So how do we really get the people who may not be knowing anything about the automation or the technology? How would we involve them into this? How would they benefit out of this? But I think looking at the list of the reforms, I'm not a tax expert, but looking at it, a very long list of tax reforms, it looks like the objective is to meet this target of which you said 17% increase revenue generation next year. So obviously it had to be perceived and achieved through some magic buttons which you said. So those magic buttons, I mean, could be these reforms which will be introduced during this year.
Yeah, but the concern was that usually when you talk about documentation, VAT mode is actually used to document, right? You have done away with that. Self-assessment, no audit without formally being nominated. The audit has to be from external source, not from FBR. With that kind of concessions and comfort level, is there still a possibility that you will be able to document much?
I'm not very sure, but self-assessment may be an option to bring in new taxpayer. But otherwise, I mean, the tax system is already working. There is no problem in that.
But so the speech actually didn't say that. There was no.
I don't think so that the entire tax system will be converted into the self-assessment and there will be no audit. There is a third-party audit, I think.
Right, yeah, exactly. But I have to go to Dr. Bakar, but very quickly, Dutani sir wants to say something. Please, sir, go ahead.
No, I think that very quickly, not to take on anybody's time, but two things. Number one, the self-assessment system, yes, I know it doesn't work. I don't think that's where we're going to go. I think what we are looking at are some innovations like POS, point-of-sale devices, which I think, and I'd be surprised if it doesn't work, if somehow, these Tajiran associations and Dukandar associations, these guilds are actually held by a few people, but the average retailer, as you can call the Dukandar on the corner of your street, right, will actually, I believe, take on these POS devices as a plus. Why? Because these guys don't have any bookkeeping. They hardly know how to keep track of their profit and loss. Once they understand this, I believe that the lowest level of retail will welcome the POS devices.
Right. But I must say that you are quite an optimist.
No.
And
but these machines, Farrukh, was also used last year for the restaurants and many retailers. And I exactly know because I have seen them, how did they work, and it really gave you very good transparency to three parties. Number one, restaurant or retailer. Number two, FBR. And number three, a person who is paying for the bill. So he also even gets a receipt where he can go and check whether the GST has been paid
that
or
is true,
not.
sir, but still there is a lot of reluctance or hesitancy when it comes to coming into the tax net. And there is a reason why we have such a humongous informal or undocumented sector. But let me go to Dr. Bakar. Let me see whether he agrees with the optimism of my panelists in the studio. Dr. Bakar, sir.
Thank you, Farrukh Sahab. I think this is a very uphill task, and I think under the current circumstances, when you are facing a prolonged incidence of pandemic, it's harder to negotiate, particularly, of course, with the wholesale and retail trade sector, But let me also bring in here another, in fact, two dimensions here which make it more complex. One is that if you have an enterprise which is working in multiple provinces, going beyond one province actually increases the burden or the complexity of tax filing, increases your compliance costs. So this year, based upon the decisions of Council of Common Interest, we were really hoping that the budget will introduce some measures towards tax harmonization. Currently, you have 7 different tax authorities in the country. So if you have a business which is in 4 provinces and you are a small and medium enterprise, you literally need a fleet of chartered accountants to comply with all these tax agencies, and otherwise you would end up practicing evasion and avoidance.
Right. Dr. Sab, here's a concern that looking at India's example, when they introduced goods and services tax, and harmonization was apparently the reason, but because it was rushed, it became a liability on many business owners. So do you recommend that Pakistan should accelerate into that direction, or it should take some time for the more study of harmonization?
Yes, so Farrukh Sahab, in all countries following the devolution process, there have been hiccups, and India will be no exception. India is trying to work on its system since 1992, and it's still not there yet. Turkey has taken 15 years. But this is what we have to do. It's already been almost 10 years now since the provinces were given additional powers in the tax domain, but we haven't moved at the pace at which we should have. Currently, only MOUs have been signed across various government tax bodies. Usually, MOUs are signed when you are when you want to improve on your public-private trust. But here MOUs are being signed between province and federation. I think this process could have been actually expedited, and with some data sharing, these tax authorities can be linked. At least you can introduce a unified taxpayer forms so that multiple filing can be rationalized across the federation.
Right. Your interaction with the previous governments and previous finance ministers and the new one, do you think that at this moment the government is open to these ideas being introduced by the economists and experts and business community?
Certainly, Farrukh Sahab, the government is very open to the ideas. Our problem is a little different now. We have seen one of the fastest turnovers of finance administration under this government. We have seen finance ministers come and go. We have seen 4 different or 5 different heads of FBR change within under 3 years time period. I think with this kind of turnover, even if you're giving good advice to somebody, the time for implementation or time to actually absorb good ideas from the outside is very limited.
Right. That's a very, very good argument. And I'm immediately after Idris Saab, I'm going to go back to Ahmed Jawad Saab to talk about the rate of change of finance ministers. But Idris Saab, once again, the revenue collection. You must have worked with various formulae that the previous governments actually came up with. But it seems that when it comes to self-assessment, when it comes to all these collection measures, without any kind of inducement or any kind of threat, a lot of people don't want to actually cooperate. What happens now?
Actually, in this way, in this regard, we need to extend the tax network, because what we are doing, those who are giving the tax, we are just pressurizing them to give more instead of like enhance the collection book. Basically, if I'm not wrong, 2.2 million, including the salaried class, is now on our tax net. Out of 220 million people live in this country, only 22 million is paying the tax. So 2.2 million, sorry, is paying the taxes, which is not enough. Obviously, we need to extend the tax net, and that will help to achieve all the targeted. Instead of just
and the
waiting for
question, Idrisa, the question was how? Because we have seen that repeatedly when it comes to the economy of carrots and sticks, we keep on offering more and more carrots. Sometimes there are tax breaks, there are concessions, and yet we don't see the kind of cooperation that was needed. Self-assessment will also withdraw the sticks that were in the equation. Idrisa.
Sorry, can't hear you. Can you repeat, please?
Yeah, I was saying, sir, that usually in any equation there has to be carrots, there have to be carrots and sticks. But it seems that repeatedly concessions after concessions were given. The previous government, when it was going, it actually introduced a tax amnesty system. Then this government also offered one. And while concessions are there, including self-assessment, they also withdraw the stakes or the coercive measure. What happens now? Do you think that the businessmen are going to, especially the informal sector, are going to be part of the documented economy voluntarily?
In this country, nobody would do anything voluntarily. Government have to take the measures to push the tax community to give more and more taxes in this circle. Otherwise, voluntarily word does not exist as far as the tax is concerned. This is my theory, this is my concept. Maybe I'm wrong, but this is what, if you will not push for anything, you will not get anything.
Right. Dutani Sahab, I'm going to come to you in a bit. Let me first go to Ahmed Jawad Sahab. Ahmed Jawad Sahab, 4 finance ministers. And we are listening to the new one. And he is not a member of parliament. Is there a way to ensure that what happened to Hafiz Sheikh Sahab doesn't happen to him? And that he stays for the rest of the term?
Farrukh, I'm not worried about the future of finance minister. I'm worried about the future of Pakistan, and which I should not be after this budget, because I see a very good indicator.
How do you disconnect the two? Because the finance manager or finance minister of a country actually assures that compliance is there, that whatever he has promised is implemented.
Farrukh, I tend to disagree here, because in my opinion, it's not the man who is representing the finance ministry or the government of Pakistan. It's the institution of government of Pakistan, which was represented by Asad Umar at some point of the time. It was later on represented by Hafiz Sheikh Sahab, and now it is represented by Shaukat Tareen Sahab. And tomorrow, if there is somebody else,
for a brief
I mean, I would not count that, because it was such a brief time.
Let me qualify this. Hafiz Sheikh Sahab negotiated with the IMF, right?
Yeah.
And you got a package. In that package, there were certain very harsh terms. And now the current finance minister is trying to renegotiate them. So individuals clearly matter.
Yeah, you know, what is basically, who is responsible in front of the public? That is PTI, that is Imran Khan. And at times, the strategy of a technocrat, a strategy of a finance minister may not be aligned with the aim and objective of the government or the leadership. And leadership at this point of the time was more worried about the rising food inflation. And somehow it just could not be contained. So perhaps there was a need to have some change in the strategy. and so
No,
when
but
you
he-
need a change,
Hang on,
you
with
can
due
change a
respect,
person
He
also.
was not elected to the Senate, and that's why you have to change the finance minister, right?
No,
And that happened.
It was not the reason. Yes, it happened after the election of the Senate.
Right, Dutani Saab, you can comment on that as well. I was hoping Ahmed Jawad Saab is going to say, the day after tomorrow, we are going to nominate him for the Senate. But that answer didn't come. I don't know.
It's not
why.
required.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if I may very quickly, I mean, your panel does not agree on this fact. I mean, to be very honest, as an average Pakistani, I would like to say that the finance minister, the personality of the finance minister matters.
Yeah.
Because they represent the party that they're elected from, they represent the exchequer, they also represent the prime minister, and yes, there has to be a sort of alignment between the prime minister and the finance minister. You have a finance minister because the prime minister does not know finance, right? So I would not have Imran Khan running the finance of Pakistan, right? That's very clear. I would not have PTI as a party running the finance of Pakistan. I would rather have a finance group of good managers running the finance of Pakistan. That was what would give me surety and give me courage. Second, when you're negotiating with your lenders, whether they be the Paris Club, whether they be the fund, whether they be any part, any loan, bilateral, whatever, it matters who's the finance minister.
Yeah. And who is
because
assuring
some of
them?
these guys, who's assuring them? Yes, the finance minister, when they go out of Pakistan, have and should have the backing of the government.
Right.
And only that finance minister makes a difference. That has the full backing of the government.
Right.
And I do believe that Hafiz Sheikh, to a very strong extent, had that backing. And I do also believe, the one thing I concur with, that it's not that he was not elected to the Senate was the actual reason of his removal. But if I may just quickly add one thing.
And you make it your conclusion as well, because I'm told that we have to actually close the program soon.
Okay, we have not mentioned, I mean, we worried about the revenue collection, right? I think you may have not noticed, and I don't see much of that in the budget, and I think this is because of the mafia called BAT, British American Tobacco. A lot of my friends in BAT are not going to like this when I say this, but BAT today controls about 30% of what happens on the Karachi Stock Exchange, directly or indirectly. Now, what does BAT control? Tobacco, right? So tobacco plus, if you link some of the MNCs, we're looking at large sugary drinks. One of the things we need to understand is excise is a tool that we have not used very, very well. If you were to properly enforce excise, excise is when excisable goods means the cigarettes, tobacco, we could also include in that sugar. If sugar is dangerous to health, it's going to be a double whammy for us because we also save sugar that way, right? So one is that area. The second thing on the harmonization of taxes across the province. I think I just want, and in the concluding remarks, to say that while I agree with on the effort across provinces for some agencies, I think if you realistically look at it, I think some of that struggle is required for two reasons. We don't really have proper migration of labor and skills across Pakistan. Whoever goes to Karachi sits in Karachi, other than the corporate sector, right? So unless provinces and cities are asked to devise some of the better ways of attracting good talent, the competition doesn't happen.
Right.
Thank you.
We have already overshot our time. Very quickly, Dr. Bakar, your conclusion, sir.
Yes, I think going forward, one really